It gives me an immense pleasure to welcome you all to our third webinar, part of the Heritage Insight series, a monthly platform dedicated to exploring a wide range of topics, including history, cultural heritage, arts, handicrafts, and their relevance to contemporary architectural practices. This initiative is a proud collaboration between BMS School of Architecture and CRDS, Center for Research and Development Studies Foundation. This series is designed to deepen our understanding of India's rich historical legacy, vibrant culture, and diverse artistic traditions. It serves as a dynamic space for faculty members, early career academics, PhD scholars, and students from fields such as architecture, history, humanities, and art. Our goal is to foster a more profound appreciation of our country's cultural heritage while encouraging interdisciplinary dialogue and collaboration. We envision this platform as one where visionaries, emerging talents, and experienced professionals come together to share insights, exchange ideas, and co create solutions that honor traditional knowledge while addressing contemporary challenges. Through this series, we aim to cultivate a deep respect for our nation's architectural and cultural legacy and to contribute to its preservation and evolution for the benefit of future generations. This dialogue series thrives on the collective insights and perspectives of each one of you. Your engagement is essential, and we eagerly anticipate the meaningful contributions you will bring to this conversation. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Shaila Bantanur, the esteemed director of BMSSA, a distinguished academician and practitioner. She holds a doctorate from the renowned IIT Roorkee and brings over 2 decades of experience in research, teaching, and practice. Dr. Bandanur has made remarkable contributions to academia with numerous publications in national and international journals and is currently spearheading 2 international collaborations with the University of Notre Dame, US and Kathmandu University, Nepal. A strong advocate for bridging academia and industry, she has launched impactful initiatives such as the Research Dialogue Series, Knowledge Series, and the recently established Heritage Insight Series. Unfortunately, today she couldn't join us as she's part of a panel in the conference. So, on behalf of her, I would like to invite all of you. Now, with great pleasure, I would like to introduce architect Shobha Narendra Kumar, an accomplished architect and urban planner with over 25 years of experience. She is the founder of IPAC, a renowned multidisciplinary architecture firm based in Bangalore. A distinguished alumna of IIM and a celebrated woman entrepreneur, Architect Shobha seamlessly blends her architectural expertise with a profound passion for India's heritage, particularly focusing on Karnataka. Her dedication to preserving and promoting India's cultural legacy inspired her to establish the CRDS Foundation, which emphasizes heritage conservation and the creation of sustainable living environments. As a driving force behind the CRDS, Architect Shobha leads efforts to uncover Karnataka's hidden treasures while championing sustainable practices that will benefit future generations. I now invite Architect Shobha to share a few words with us.
Thank you, Abhirami, for the generous introduction. And thanks, Mr. Maniyarasan, for accepting this webinar session. And I hope and I'm very sure that all the participants will have good takeaways from this session. CRDS Foundation is an NGO which is based in Bangalore. We started this journey in 2019, and we focus on preservation, protection, and promotion of heritage in India. So the thing is, I mean, we all focus more on preservation, protection, but promotion also comes up with an added responsibility, which has to be taken care by all our citizens of India. So we have just taken some small initiative and then we have started up this NGO. And we recently launched Bhavya Bharti. This is an initiative where it is focusing on capturing, doing some research and promoting our rich and built tangible and intangible heritage, traditions, and cultures of in Indian context. And yeah, there are many more things. Maybe I shall be sharing my website wherein people can just go through our initiatives. And we look forward for the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. I would like to once again extend a warm welcome to all of you for today's session of the Heritage Insight series titled Photogrammetry, the Transformative Role of Imaging in Cultural Heritage. We are truly privileged to have with us architect Maniyarasan, a distinguished specialist in photogrammetry. Maniyarasan are an architect, photographer, and photogrammetry expert, seamlessly blends his knowledge of design, conservation, and visual storytelling to advance the use of imaging in documenting the built environment. A distinguished alumnus of SPA New Delhi and NIT Ahmedabad, his work spans architectural photography, aerial mapping, and photogrammetry. He has collaborated with prominent institutions such as INTAC, NID, and CEPT. In addition to his practice, architect Maniyarasan has conducted numerous capacity building workshops across India, empowering professionals to incorporate modern documentation techniques into architectural and conservation practices. As a tutor at LLF MMT and CEPT CPP digital documentation programs, he has mentored many batches of professionals, driving innovation in heritage imaging. Currently, he teaches design and history at the Care School of Architecture in Trichy and leads a digital imaging lab for the JVM Museum Restoration Project in Mysore. His notable contributions include heading the Intact Bangalore documentation team for the UNESCO recognition of the sacred ensembles of Hoysalas in 2022. Architect Maniyarasan's research interests focus on Chettinadu architecture, cultural festivals, and the evolution of photographic practices in Tamil Nadu, bridging traditional knowledge with modern emerging technologies. We are truly fortunate to have him with us today, and now I invite architect Maniyarasan to share his insights on the transformative role of imaging in cultural heritage. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Thanks, Abhirami, and thanks to BMS and CRDS for having this activity that's kind of like has been set rolling, and I'm glad to be part of that. Let me share straight away. My screen is visible, right? Cool. So the overall idea of this presentation or this session is to kind of showcase aspects, possibilities, and potentials, along with the challenges that we have faced as teams in documenting various sites, and that also includes artifacts and sometimes mapping. So when we say documentation of cultural heritage, we are talking about as small as a small sculpture to as large as a complete village or a town that can be mapped with the help of imaging. Let me just jump in, and I'll talk about it. So just to give a brief idea about my background, like I think Abhirame has said enough. But then just to give from the context of the kind of works that I do, I think it is important to kind of like bring in that inclusive learning that has happened through my education and as well as in the academia and in the industry as working with the conservation architects. So it all starts with architecture and then learning masters in photography, which kind of combined to start blossoming when I was doing a PhD that got never completed, though, in architectural documentation at IIT Hyderabad, where I also got a chance to do a small course on the conservation of wall paintings, where I got a chance to work with art conservators. I think that kind of opened up a lot of avenues. And as I continued on working on photogrammetry and aerial mapping, the opportunity to work in academia kind of helped me to go back to my fundamentals, like specifically a couple of sessions that I in a semesters that I took in Care School on architectural drafting, kind of re-established my idea as and clarified the troubles that I used to have, and then that kind of like started flowing in, opening up in capacity building workshops, and to a point where I work with a museum restoration project where we are not just looking to document but also strategize on a long period asset creation or digital repositories. I think doing a project on a day and completing it and giving it doesn't end the work there. I believe every image or every data that comes out of cultural heritage sites are its or has its own value. And one particular fundamental question, or rather a statement that always has is runs in my mind, is what is this data going to be valuable? How is this data going to be valuable 50 years down the lane? How is this going to work as an archive? How is someone down the lane after 30, 40 years is going to be able to retrieve it, is going to be able to read it, interpret, and use it? That is one thing that is always there in everything that we are doing, that I do. That question is kind of pertinent. So what you're talking about, photogrammetry for cultural heritage, for conservation in practices and applications. So application, I think, is the most important aspect. Photogrammetry could be a technique, and then that could be learned in probably a couple of hours or in a couple of tutorials that are available online. But I think the application part and the kind of context that we are in is not going to let you do like a simple technique that can be followed upon. I'll start with a very heavy text slide, and I'll save you all the time by cutting it off. And just to read this one particular line to start the presentation with is when I want to talk about documentation is both the products and the action of meeting the information needs of heritage management. I think this code from ICOMOS is kind of compulsive and comprehensive in terms of what we do as documentation professionals, either as an open exclusive documentation professional or as a conservator. Documentation is a cognitive, as a cognitive action, and it needs to be understood as a critical process central to all conservation applications that ultimately is leading to variable choices that is available to architects, conservators, artists, painters, photographers, whichever conservation that we are talking about. Documentation is the first step for all kinds of conservation and restoration activity. And it is very important to not look at documentation as a product, but as a process and a part of a multiple action that kind of happens. So to go back, where is it all starting for me in between all those things that I put together is the question of what is the role of visual documentation, or simply to say, what is the role of photography in architecture? What is the role of photography in conservation? And 95% or even 98% of the time that we end up seeing them as product photography, either as before and after. In architectural photography, it's only after with blue skies and everything. In conservation, it becomes a before and after product photography, if you want to call it. There is a lot of thing that goes in between, and then we don't really bother about it. I think this is the point of where the question that kind of kick me into the conservation documentation arena, where I am looking at why can't visual imagery not be a participant? Why is it always that it is standing outside the circle of conservators? Can imaging be part of the overall thought process of conservation practice? These are some questions which kind of kept running in the initial parts because I was only behaving like someone who would be called after something is done. And then it kind of like really helps, doesn't really help that. So one major thing is to kind of start with a rational. Why are we doing this? What are we doing it with? How are we doing for? And who are we doing it for? And what will it be after a certain amount of time? The rational and purpose can define a lot of things. So to start with a few aspects, so there are multiple techniques that are available to document conservation or cultural heritage. Why is it that we are pushing photogrammetry is something that makes us these important points as what we are looking at from the Indian context, or in a larger ambit, we are looking at documentation for developing regions, where affordability and availability is the most important aspect, because the West and the countries Australia and Japan and China are running away with 3D digital heritage tools and laser scanners and HBIM, and a lot of things are already happening across and along with coding and programming. Whereas in India, we are still talking what is photogrammetry. and how is it useful, and is it really required? Now, the point is, with everyone having a camera in our hand, we can straight away say that's the affordable resource that is in our hand and our available tool that can provide reliable data, which can give us the compelling information from data, and to understand that as a continuous process, which is adapting to the purpose, adapting to the context, creating multiple or local micro level, organizational level digital repositories, which can be retrievable at any point of time after 5 years or 50 years, thus creating values and asserts for our region or for the country on the whole. This is kind of a summary of, or rather a theoretical framework for all that we do. And then all these aspects need to be taken care of. And the most important thing, as I would want to repeat, is the photogrammetry makes it affordable, available, and accessible, which with a certain bit of knowledge of imaging and space, we are able to make sure that that adapts to any condition that we are or challenge that we are thrown at. Now, I'm going to put together a few case studies where how imaging played a part in the practice, in the conservation practice. And incidentally, this project in Hyderabad, the Osmania University for Women in Koti, Hyderabad, is the first project I entered in as a conservation photographer, uh, where I was blown up by the building that was standing, and I just said to the conservation architect,
Somebody is unmuted. Can you please? I think it's Namrata.
okay, okay.
Hi. Can you please mute yourself?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So this was the first project I went in, and the one thing after seeing the building, I told the conservation architect is, you pay me, you don't pay me, I don't care. Let me photograph this building. So what I would do is I would go, and I was doing a lot of architectural photography projects at that point of time. So a simple thing would be like every time I would kind of like go in the late evenings, early mornings, try to shoot uh, like with that beautiful sunlight, with that golden hours, with the dawn and dusk. And I'd be like looking at all different aspects, compositions and aesthetics and all. One thing that kind of happened over that period of time when I was shooting, and I realized that these images are not going inside even the monthly reports of the conservators, which were being given to the donors. And even the basic phone cameras where images were used in those reports. The only points where my images were used on the cover page. And that kind of made me thinking like that really hit my ego too. And I was wondering like, why are they not using it? And then when I kind of like digged in deeper, I realized the importance of meanings or importance of information that an image can give is much more required and much more relevant than bringing in beauty or aesthetics to the image in conservation point practice. So that kind of like made me think in the initial parts of this project, and I started wondering. And this is one important junction where there is a dollhouse. I think a lot of buildings have this practice of building a model dollhouse in the premise, along with the full blown building that's there. So what you see on top is the status in which it was found, and what you see on the left, the black and white photograph, is a photograph that was found from the university. Along with these two things, the entire dollhouse was reconstructed, rebuilt, restored, and that helped in understanding the original building that is standing in front of us. Now, this was all happening around, and with this one photograph of that black and white photograph, there used to be so many discussions happening within the conservators and the conservation team. Now, what is this one photo? Because the one problem is that there was only one photo, and that is the only reason that they were having. And then because they had at least one photo, they started dealing with understanding each and every information that image can give them. So this is one point where it told me the importance of archives, because every time we complained about the lack of archives, and are we doing the same thing? Are we actually taking that into account that 20 years down, someone is going to probably abuse us, that we didn't leave any archives for the project that we worked on. So these are all things that kind of like kept me going. So I'm going to look at the very small part within the residency building, which is the Darbar Hall that you can see. So it is undergoing restoration around 2018. So just to give a brief idea, we are talking about the ceiling. It's the paper mesh ceiling that was imported from UK, that were custom made, around 650 panels. They were shipped and they were nailed to the ceiling. And this, as you can see now, there are some panels which have come off. So around 2016, I was informed that this space is going to be restored. Can we just document it? So just to give you an idea in the overall setting of residency, this is where the space is, the Darbar Hall is. And you can also see it's a double height space. So I started documenting. When I say documenting, there is no photogrammetry here. I was just documenting with images, wide angle shots, panoramic shots, all possible things. And this is how it looked. You can see at least around 15 to 20% has been damaged. Some of them can be repaired. Has Some of them has to be repaired and replaced, and some can be just as it is. So that's the original image, the before image. And from here is where I started exploring multiple things. I think this site gave me complete freedom and liberty to experiment with the photographic practices that I could try to do with. And I just thought, theoretically, since it's a flat surface, I should be able to document one after the other, shoot with a long lens and stitch them, and I can give the art conservators a very large image to work with instead of one wide angle image. And this is also the first time I documented myself documenting. And that's kind of like helping me understand what I did wrong or what I did right. So what I got out of that is it didn't stitch automatically because of the change in light as we go from one side to the other. They were change in color balance. And then I had to forcefully fit them in to give the art conservators what they were looking for, something like this. And the art conservators were able to find out that I've actually done it manually. So if you can see it closely, there are minor changes in color, minor changes in the white balance, which kind of didn't help. And then what they did was, that was the first time I was introduced to photogrammetry in 2016-17. And since I had documented it very systematically, it just straight away gave a 3D information of the overall ceiling that was in front of me. That was my eureka moment, if I have to say, because I couldn't believe that 2D images could actually give a 3D information, including that smallest undulation that is going on within the surface. This is a point where I felt architecture and photography came into uh, unison, where it can work together. That photogrammetry was that perfect point of junction that I probably was waiting for till that time, because even in my PhD, I was trying to forcefully fit architecture and photography together, and mostly that kind of like goes in a different wavelength. So as you can see, even that in small things that are coming off was clearly documented, and from which the art conservators started working with. And this is also the time I realized how art conservators work with, what kind of information that they are looking for. And this was on their board. This was an A3 print that they had put it up on their notice board, where from the report, where my photographs couldn't go inside the report, I could see that my images are the most primary information, set of information that art conservators were working with. There were a couple of art conservators who were located in London and Noida, and they were working just with the images and data that I have given them. They have completely dissected them. They made the glossary out of it. They made the number of parts that are intact. They made the number of parts that were completely lost, the number of parts that needs to be repaired. And this opened up the floodgates for me. And then we continued documenting the conservation process. This is scaffold. This is after having a scaffolding that is up there. You can see one of the art conservators doing some examinations and assessments. And over a period of 2.5 years, there were a group of 4 or 5 art conservators working inch after inch in restoring the whole thing. There were panels that they completely cleaned up. There were panels that they just had to put it up there, and there were panels that they had to recreate and repair. Now, there was a problem where there were some panels, around 10 to 20 panels, which are completely damaged. And there was a question of how are we going to get the paper mesh, which was done in 19th century and 20th century and then brought and nailed in. Who's going to do that? Are they going to find the artists, craftsmen now? Are they going to find the material now? All these problems kind of went in. Finally, going by the principles, the basic principles of conservation, of not tampering with authenticity, what the conservators decided was we will photograph the intact panel as it is, and then to 1:1 scale, and then we will reprint them in a canvas, and that will be pinned up, nailed up back to the ceiling. A lot of all the parts which were completely out were the ones that were printed and pasted, nailed to the top. So for a normal man, for a common man who comes in to see this Darbar Hall, will not be able to find a difference. But a conservator or an imaging person or someone would be able to find out, pick out those 20 panels which are printed and put together. So this is the completely restored ceiling along with those prints. And to simply say the before and after would have been the only image set of images that we would have otherwise had. Now here we continue to document once the restoration was done. We have documentation to the level of this detail. So any time down the line in the future, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, someone is going to restore the repairs that were available at that point of time, will have access to the complete set of information, the documents that were done in 2018 and 19 by us, to make enough interventions to make correct, authentic issues that can be sorted out. And this is the kind of that you would see now, and it is open to public from 2023 January, and there is also a museum and a gallery inside. And in between, we also did some fun stuff where did some jigsaw puzzles and gave it to the same conservators who are working with, and the timeline, how much they took, and also just to add a bit of kind of a fun that that conservation need not be always boring. So coming to the next, one of my most interesting. So if the case study one was more of an experimentation for me, case study two on documenting the sacred ensembles of Vaisala was the point where my processes were standardized. The photogrammetric processes standardized. When Intact contacted us, where we had started having meetings about how to document this extremely complex, heavily detailed three Hoysala temples in Belur, Halibedu, and Somnathpura. The first thing is we didn't have access to laser scanners, which should have been the ideal case for all three temples. Uh, Due to the heavy nature of detailing that is there, so we had to do a bit of manual, lot of digital and photogrammetric methods, and in combination. And the most important point is to produce drawings. Just to simplify it, what are we supposed to have, what are we supposed to give is simple set of drawings that is going to be part of the dossier. Now, we didn't know exactly what is going to work, what is not going to work. So what I did was I took my entire kit that I had, and we had 12 days of at the site from all three temples. And then we started strategizing in the first temple at Belur, where will manual documentation work better? Where will images, simple images would work better? Where would photogrammetry work better? Where would be the combination of manual and imaging methods would be required? So understanding the context, the need, which is that sending a dossier, annexer, and the resources that were available with us, along with the time and methodology and its archive, where the discussion that we had to start with. Architectural documentation, when we started, we had to do a site plan, floor plans, sections, elevations, and details. Now, by the end of the first set or first temple, we had defined our methods where site plan will be done with drones, aerial photogrammetry. Floor plans, we will not use any photogrammetry due to a lot of other limitations. We will just do manual measurement. Sections will be combination of methods, that is digital and manual. Elevations will be done photogrammetry and gigapixel photogrammetry. Details will be done with photography and photogrammetry. Now, this is where we started rolling. The information that we had in the first temple that we took around 6 days to complete the project in the Belur temple. In Halibedu, we took 3 to 4 days. By the time we reached Somnathpura, we finished the entire process in 1.5 days and got out. Now, there was one more problem that we kind of faced is because the only question or the only the discussion that we had within the thing, how are we going to give drawings? We are making photogrammetry outputs. Is it, and that is a point, because the only thing the team, there was a team that was kept ready to rasterize, that we are going to give them the photogrammetry output and they are going to rasterize it. And to a point where we realized that what is the point of rasterization if we already have them information with the scaled information, to be very specific, measurable scaled information right in front of us as a photograph. So that is where we kind of played with hybrid methods, as you can see here. So one part of it is rasterized, the other part is as we used right from the image. So we kind of tried using. So these are the drone images, drone photogrammetry images, where we geotagged with the latitude, longitude information, and then that was sent as a drawing. The same thing worked with Halibedu and Somnathpura as well. These are ortho images. These are not single images. These are multiple images that were stitched together to get this information. Now, as I said, there was a team that was continuously rasterizing. And then we also took some time to figure out and get the elevation that what do we call this is an ortho mosaic elevation, or a scale rectified imaging, where this image, the bottom, can replace the drawing that is on top. Now, if when we deal with conservation architecture and spatial understanding, the decaying nature, the change in color, the cracks, the kind of moisture, humidity, and all, orthomosaics made a hell lot of a difference when in representation in comparison with drawings, because drawings at the end of the day is kind of giving us information after losing all the data, after using almost most of the data. There's a huge data loss as we transfer into rasterization, where photogrammetry is going to give us complete visual understanding of the kind of condition that we are looking in to be able to assess. And these are reflected ceiling plans. As you can see on the left side, it is all solid hatching because we were not allowed inside. So whatever, the most important point in photogrammetry is whatever that has visual access to be able to photographed, that will be part of your photogrammetry. Something that you have not photographed, something that you can't photograph, will not be part of your photogrammetric process. This is Belur temple, where you can see one almost 60% of the reflected ceiling plan. Every spire is completely different. It is impossible to think to manually measure and draw this. And how did we did that reflected ceiling plan? Here is a little, might look funny, but it was really a painful process at that point of time, where we didn't have any idea, we didn't have any extra set of equipments. What I do now, for what I would do now in a reflected ceiling plan now is I do have a roller which will take the tripod in. I will be connecting my camera with the phone app, Canon app, and then I will be documenting with an help of another person who would assist me, clicking one after the other. I don't have to do this really the ring or the grudge kind of a devil kind of a position every time to and break my back as well. So in one way, some people still consider photogrammetry, since it is digital, it is so easy. I would say as much as manual documentation gives us that understanding, the tactility I think photogrammetry gives a different kind of tactile understanding because you are walking across the site, front and back, understanding the light, understanding the texture. What are you capturing? What are you not capturing? There's a lot of other advantages that kind of come in with photogrammetry, and it is certainly not easy. And so these are the kind of layered information that we got out of while we documenting the external part of the Somnathpura temple, Keshava temple. So you can see this can be printed probably as much as possible. Even a double or a triple A zero size sheet can be printed to scale 1:2, 1:5, whichever you want. These are scaled information without any distortion that is naturally happening in photography. Now, to some this was like a summary uh, of like, so that is one more thing that we do in every project. We try to do a publication. We try to do a small video, which will kind of remain with us, which is also allows us to disseminate the aspects and these kind of exchanges that helps us. So this is a kind of a typical method or all possible processes that we kind of took over in those three temples to be able to deliver. We also had a manual documentation team parallelly working, finding the profiles, checking, because photogrammetry it cannot be complete without having a manual team that is helping us in co-referencing with each other. Laser scanning cannot work without photogrammetry, without co-referring for its own. So the third case study is a little out of the arc of a conventional documentation thing. This was not to make any drawings, but this was part of a PhD research. One of my junior from SPA, has just completed a PhD in Melbourne University, where she is the person who performs around heritage spaces. And in her PhD, she is looking at an interactive experience where the performance can happen around a space virtually. And that was kind of like interesting. So the first thing was the suggestion, or the first decision was to do it in laser scanning. This is by Harirni Wow in Ahmedabad, which is a 5-level step well. It's pretty huge compared to the other ones. And the laser scanner was supposed to be there. And 3 days before, we got to know the laser scanner was not available due to various other reasons. So I just gave it we had a discussion and thought like, let's give it a try to do it in photogrammetry. Though it might be a long process, it is not impossible. So that was a point where we started. But as we say in the Indian context, we can in a site you will see new dramas, you'll see new screenplays that are there. After acquiring all permissions from ASI Baroda, we go reach the site at morning 6 o'clock, and we see a group of people who are taking an advertisement shoot for the World Yoga Day, and then we had to push ourselves and we had to delay our work, and a lot of other things do happen. We have to accommodate all these problems and challenges. So what we did was we started from the last level. We started documenting one step at a time. Incidentally, the entire uh, step 12 is completely in geometry, where we know where are we going. There are lines, there are guidelines that, if you can say, the imaginary ones, which helps us to ensure that we continue to grow. So this kind of an output that we got from 1,850 images that were shot over a period of 2 days and processed for a period of 2 weeks and reprocessed for a period of another 1.5 months to 2 months, after which this was sent to Australia online. And after a lot of repurposing, and finally, Shinjita was able to present it along with her performance. So these are the kind of outputs that we got. We got the entire cut section on both sides of the wow, the step 12. And these are something that really, like, because I also teach history, so these kind of like gave a lot of different set of information that we have not normally seen. We normally see this as a drawing, and to see them as images, to see them with a photographic quality was something really interesting for me. So this is a small compilation of the doctoral committee meeting. This will give you an idea of that interactive virtual interaction that we are talking about. It will also show you the potential of 3D data. And for people who are working with 3D data, when we are talking about people who are working with 3D data, it is not just conservators. It has gone to a different level altogether. We have gamers, filmmakers. We have whole lot of people who are using the 3D data. So as you can see, she's wearing a motion sensor. Uh, she's wearing a motion sensor in her entire body, and then she is dancing around them. And that is kind of getting superimposed on the 3D model, which is in front of her on the screen. So there was a lot of time that we took in optimizing the entire data because it was absolutely heavy. The OBJ file data that first time we sent to Melbourne was around 40 GB, and they took a lot of time. And then by the time they downloaded, they were not able to open it up in the softwares. Then we had to reduce the file size. Why am I talking about this? Is because with this 3D data, with this heritage, digital heritage kind of coming in, optimization plays a huge role. And that is the first point where we say there's a lot of gaps. When specifically when you are dealing with NGOs, when you're dealing with government organizations who are yet to get updated, who are yet to be still talking in i5 and i7 and i9 ranges, where we need to kind of like upgrade ourselves into close to supercomputer ones. So this is Srinjita herself performing on the side along with the virtual thing from the 3D model data. So that's a set of like, so she was a PhD candidate. Now she has finished her PhD, and it was a lovely experience to go through to understand the gaps and all the problems that can come with when we are dealing with extremely large sized sites and information. And this is the doctoral committee people that they were wearing a VR glass and then were able to experience the site virtually from Melbourne with the 3D data that we had. Now, coming to the most pertinent question, what is photogrammetry? To simply say, there are multiple definitions. This is my definition. I would say, not that I've discovered it, but then I've kind of like rewired the text. It is a technique of getting measurable imagery with multiple sequential photographs. When you're talking about stitching images and all, the most important difference between a photo stitch and photogrammetry output or an orthomosaic is scale rectification. We are talking about measurable imagery. But is there a question where, like when we say sequential and multiple, these are the examples that I can, as we have already seen, these are the examples of multiple sequential imaging that we are talking about. Now, when we are talking about the measurable imagery, do you think the information is not measurable or how it is done? So this is just another example of how we are going around. So I think Somnathpura is the best example, best sample to do photogrammetry, as it has levels on all layers where we can go and document it. So now this is also stitched imagery that we normally call panorama. I think this every one of us, I don't think there'll be any exceptions. Every one of us would have done a panorama, which is simply achieved through stitching multiple photographs. Now, the major difference between photogrammetry and panorama is the scale and also with the method that we are taking it. Now, what is the difference between panorama and photogrammetry? Photogrammetry is a point where camera moves around the surface, whereas panorama is a point where camera just turns from the same position. Theoretically, when you move your camera, the panorama will not stitch. I don't know that the new age cameras are able to do anything and everything, but technically by optical theory, you cannot have a panorama when the moment the camera moves. It has to be in the same position and then you need to turn around. Whereas photogrammetry, the camera physically goes around the surface. Now, just to make the difference between them, every image that we take, every image, There is no exception. There is every image. You just open your phone and then check all the images. They all are perspective images. Whereas photogrammetry, what we are talking about is an orthographic image. What is orthography? First year, first semester, we were given a cube in architecture and asked to do the plan section elevations with scale, with measurements, with all the aspects, and then we also did 1.2 point perspective. Any 1.2 point perspective presentation is a photographic presentation. Anything else that is in scale that we did in architectural drawing are orthographic. So photography is optics, and optics is fully errored. That means we just see it in a different thing compared to what we know. A table, we look at it as a parallelogram, but then we know it is rectangle. What is happening with photogrammetry is it can give the table same as rectangle. Now, the major difference that photography and photogrammetry are giving is photography is always subjective, whereas photogrammetry is almost giving us drawings, which are objective representations. Architectural photography for photography and conservation documentation, where we are trying to give more meaning, more information, is photogrammetry. Proportionate scale, that is what we will achieve from perspective, but we will get absolute scale. Photography can be single image, it can also be multiple stitched image. Photogrammetry is always multiple images. What are we trying to do? We are always trying to convert the perspective into orthographic projection. That is architectural photography converted distortion correction. Now, what is that? This is a structure in Hyderabad right next to Charminar. It's called the GHMC building. This is a single wide angle image. It's a single image, it's not a stitched image. This is the same image. If you can see the difference, what has happened is I have lens corrected. Now, even our phones have lens correction, perspective distortion correction. Earlier, we had only in Adobe Photoshop. Earlier, we had only as a tilt shift lens in the camera. Now, what have we done? When we say we have corrected, what have we done? What we have done is we have moved the vanishing point from this plane to this plane. That is what we have done when we say perspective correction. Now, what is this? This is scale rectified elevation information or an image information of the same building. Now you see the change on the top layer of the roof, how much difference it is. Now, as architects, architecture students, we normally end up taking multiple photos towards the end of documenting data capture time, and then we will just rasterize it left, right, and center. And we kind of leave a lot of allowance in the errors. So that is something can be avoided with photogrammetry. This was not taken with a handheld camera, but this was achieved with a drone, because the drone is another great advantage which doesn't allow us, which ensures that we are not dealing with any unsafe troubles in it. As you can see, there is a lot of changes. Now you can go to as close or even further information to this. Now you want to rasterize it, you rasterize it straight away, or you want to use the same image as drawing, put the scale, put the template, add it and pack it and then give it. Then this is also complete set of information as a scale rectified information. So from here, you can go even further down to the last level of the boards. Simply compare. This is a Moor Kovil Chola temple in Kodumbalur near Trichy. What you have on the left is an inscription from an old book. What you have in the center is a single photograph. What you have on the right is a photogrammetric, ortho-rectified, scale-rectified image of the same elevation. Just for comparative purposes, I've put in here. Now, what you also see here is this was achieved with simple fonts, where we just it was done by a student where they went around the small statue. It's in Bangalore Museum, and captured to get the 3D model of it. This can be printed. The same thing, some students used to try with themselves. So when you have a subject, when you have a sculpture, when you have a statue, something, you go around. When you have a wall surface, you go like X, Y, Z axis. Now, this is a small example of capturing an artifact. This is from Mehrangarh Fort. This is a Bidri ware. This was taken almost like around 250 photographs with a macro camera, lens camera. And we can, any kind of assessment, we can have virtual museum data as part of this. what not can't you do from this? Like you can do as many things. You can recreate the whole thing. You can reprint it. All possible things. Now, just to give you an idea, what all are the basic requirements that I've had is obviously the camera, a wide angle lens. I have a GPS receiver. What you have on the left is a marker. I have a foldable scale. The software that I use is Agisoft Metashape. I also have my drones and then the controller and then the ground control markers. Those are helpful in finding the geotagging information. Now, when we say panorama, so that does that mean simple panoramas are useless? Never, because sometimes we don't really need photogrammetry. Simple photo stitching is enough. This is Tirumalnaka Palace, where there were 7 photographs shot with, say, a 100 lens. They were stitched in Photoshop, and you almost got a clean elevation image. Now, this is not photogrammetry. This is 1 point perspective image. As you can see, the bay windows on the top, on the left and the extreme left and the extreme right, you are missing information because of the perspective construction or the distortion that's happening. The same again, further going a little more, where the distortion is extremely small. This is Somnathpura that was taken with a 400 lens from that point, as I mentioned, and that cube, and to that point. And this is a series of 24 photographs that were stitched together in Photoshop to be able to achieve a very extremely detailed information. We even have a print of around 8 by 4 feet of this. One is there in Intac as well. Intac office in Bangalore. The same thing. So these are multiple images taken from one side of the city in Trichy, from other side of the Kaveri River, looking into the Srirangam. And that is the level of detailing that you can get in. So simple photo stitching can work too. Now, what have I used here is nothing but a 100 lens in the first example, 400 on the second one. You can't use a wide angle for this. So this is called the gigapixel imaging also. A lot of cave painting, rock art people, documentation, when they do that, they do use that. Camera, Photoshop, and tripod. Now, what you have on the right bottom corner is a gigapan tripod, which is extremely meticulous in terms of how do you move, because a lot of things can go wrong compared to a wide angle photo stitch with a telephoto photo stitch. Now, to come to the roots of imaging, of where is it all starting from? What is this whole thing about? Because after seeing the practice application of 3 sides, then we saw what is photogrammetry. Now let's see what is imaging, or where did it come from? What is the timeline of imaging? When we say imaging, is it picture, just photographs, is paintings, or any records or images? Now, I would start from here. These are 2 paintings. One is from around 16th century. The other one is around like 17th century, 18th century. The major difference between this painting, if you have identified, is perspective. What you have on the left is called a planometric information, or a planometric painting, Mughal miniature painting, where the sense of distance is not there. Now, what you have on the right is almost a 1 point perspective. Now, what are we trying to do is, from 14th, 15th century, the mediocre painters, they started finding a way to draw. They started finding a way to be able to get closer to the real information. I think this is where the evolution of invention towards photography was happening. Overall, if you have to simply say, uh, what you have here, art before photography was like that, whereas art after photography has gone haywire. If you kind of look into the art movements, they are continuously working towards achieving realism, the real painting, the real proportion, the scale, perspective, color, light, everything, till that 1820s, 830s, and 40s. The moment photography was born, after that, realism kind of like gone out of scene, and no one had the requirement to do painting, and that is where it went haywire. Now, what are all these guys did before that is to achieve photographic method of, or photographic representation of image. I think this is where it all started. Now, as early as 1847, after the invention of photography, we are seeing conservation documentation happening. Violet Ledoux, one of the important principles, the person who kind of like set the conservation principles, he was appointed to restore Notre Dame, and then he had commissioned to document Notre Dame. So you all know, 2019, there was a huge fire, there was a lot of damage, and there is another company which has a complete 3D data of Notre Dame, laser scanning data of Notre Dame, before fire. I think that was heavily used a lot. Then further, as we move out as early as 1850s, we see governments commissioning, documenting public squares, public buildings, public archives are kind of like coming in. You also see documenting the construction where imaging has played a huge part in understanding how things were done. The revival art movement that kind of happened with the Eiffel Tower. Then there was disassembling of Crystal Palace, where there was a proper commission of photography was done, where they started understanding the real strength of photography or potential of photography. Now, again, there's a parallel world that was going on same time with aerial imaging. You have Nadar, one of the most important historical photographers, going up in a gas balloon air and documenting Paris aerial images. Now, if you look at him, he is climbing up, he has gone up in the air and taking photograph, whereas who shot him? But incidentally, what is it is this is not an image where he has gone up, but then it is a fully set up image in his studio just for the representational purpose to add more historical value to the act or the function that he did with documenting it. Now, if you can see this is a carrier pigeon, and then you can see a camera. This was one of the earliest, or rather the earliest drone imaging that happened. And all that could have done was probably a timed image, which allowed it to go up and then take one photograph and come back, which used to be a revolution at that point of time. Now, what is photography? Now, we are just going backwards. What is photography? Digital photography. Photography is done by a person who has a camera, and every one of us has a camera. And what can a camera do? It can give us information that is efficient. It can give us efficient, evidential, to be analyzed information that is affordable and available with us, which was not the case 10 years before. And when we are talking about documenting a building, these are the simple set of imaging points, which is given as a guide for good recording practice. There's nothing big about it. It just talks about where do you start documenting. Because I think this is a point we are going to reach if some of you are going to start documenting. Where do you start? How do you do? What are the aspects that you need to look in? Is there a manual? Is there a method that I can follow? Is there someone that can help us? This has always been a problem for every one of us. And when we are looking at imaging, we are consistently looking to correct this perspective that we've been talking about. Like to say the same image, how does it look different? Like, where do we start from? Should we go closer and take a photograph like that? Should we be very far and have an appropriate lens and take that? And that can be achieved by changing, moving up, down, lifting us up, turning the orientation, changing a lens that is still shift, and whatnot. Now, is where I'm asking the question, where to start? What are the things that you need to consider when you're documenting cultural heritage? Let it be a sculpture, let it be a small coin, let it be an entire town. First question, which camera, which lens? What is the most important thing in the camera? It was megapixels earlier. Megapixel was not the case anytime, but it is the sensor of the format that we are looking in. The camera lens, what we are looking at is the wide, normal, or tilt shift, and all the other things that we need to look into it. Now, when we are talking about sensor, what is a sensor? A phone camera, we have a phone camera which is around 50 megapixels. We have a DSLR which is 20 megapixels. Does that mean a phone camera is better? Never, because the major tilting factor is a sensor size. Anyone who is looking to buy a camera, is the first aspect that you need to look at is the sensor size, not anything else. The bigger the sensor size, the maximum information that you're going to get, and also a better and not distorted image that you're going to get. The next thing is light. You need to understand light and lighting as two different things. Available light, studio light. You need to understand shutter speed as a light controller, aperture as a light controller, and ISO as a light controller. These are things that are available for people who don't know these things. There are a lot of tutorials that are available that you can look at it. And then talk about the lens angle, which allows us to construct and compose it, like how I use different lenses to stitch the images. White balance, the most important thing in cultural heritage aspect, specifically if you're working in art conservation or museum, white balance is the most important thing, followed by the resolution, color, calibration, and methods. So the most important thing that we are looking as an intangible thing is an exposure, which is a mix of aperture, shutter, and ISO. Composition is also mere mentioned, lighting and photo stitching. Any image that you're going to take, ensure that you're taking with zero. Now, this is like a crash course I'm running now on basics of photography, because this is also a problem that happened when I started taking photogrammetry workshop in the starting. I straight away jumped in, and then we find people, we are still bothered about what is the shutter speed, what is the aperture, what is the film speed on IS, what is metering, white balance. I think it's very important to understand to be able to navigate the troubles that the lighting or the space gives. And these are the next 3-4 slides are going to give you the thumb rule. Your aperture has to be f8 or f11, and the depth of field is the one that is defined by the aperture. And this is like a basic definition of it. And then we are talking about how much time does it take for one right exposure to fill in. These are some illustrations that we used to do on how to achieve that. A simple thing is you can keep f16 1 by 125, go out at 12 o'clock in the noon and take a photograph. That will be perfect. You don't have to look at anything. That's called a sunny 16 rule. And early photographers used that sunny 16 up or down depending on the lighting condition in comparison. So ISO 100 is something where we're talking about absolute film quality, clear, fully detailed resolution imaging. And then raw is another aspect that you need to look in. Most of the time, the resolution is not right. We don't have the right camera. We don't have the right space to shoot. We always have the right adverse conditions, no hide, new screenplay every time, new dramas. These are the possible issues. There's always a problem. Mind you, there is always a problem when you are documenting a cultural heritage site or an object, and there is always a solution. That is the one point I would want to drive you home with. There is always a solution. The moment you understand the space, the moment you understand imaging, the moment you understand the camera, the moment you understand all of it, you can wheel. You can do the 360 wheeling like the guys do with the bikes. You break the rules once you understood it, once you have understood it. So this is like a small summary of a documentation that we did in Someshwara temple in Bangalore, Alsur. Yeah. So this was again done for intact. The entire temple was documented in photography, photogrammetry, 360 imaging, and a lot of other things. I'll do increase a bit. Oh, sorry. So this again, we had around 3 to 5 days, where again there was a team of manual documentation. There was a where I was working with photogrammetry. We were doing manual level detailing, ensuring that all measurements that were taken. So measure drawing was a part of it, followed by photography, followed by photogrammetry, followed by 360 imaging, which was also used for a certain level of virtual walks. So measure drawing followed by photographic, basic photography. We had to look for as many different things that were allowing us to use heights. Thankfully, I had a lot of assistance this time. Like I said, I used a tripod this time to do the reflected ceiling plan with an app. And then now we'll start seeing the outputs that came out of it. Multiple methods. Say there's always a challenge, there's always a problem, there is always something happening. And we have to be up in the game to be understanding the rational, the adapt possibilities. So here we use the tripod. Someone is using the app to be able to document it properly. So we are consistently looking to adapt. We are consistently looking to adopt things, methods, because there's always going to be a problem. So these we started getting point clouds in parts. Then in some level we were able to get it as a whole, and that were used for making the drawings. Some were used as part photogrammetric outputs. Some were as straight away as images. Some were straight away as drawings. So you were able to say get this entire elevation on one side. You are able to superimpose images, the reflected ceiling fan of the Gopuram, of the main temple. Getting information inside Garbhagriha is always a trouble, always a challenge, I would say. And 360 imagery is one very extremely usable uh, tool, specifically when you're dealing with very close spaces. So you're able to get all possible sides of the information with a 360 image. And then we also are doing a lot of artifacts. This was recently done in Baroda with IGNCA Center, where we are documenting the statues. And this was again, we used and went around with handheld cameras, with ladders, with tripods. This is another small example at the Srirangapatna Tipu Palace, where we were documenting the entire painted wall like this, and then we were able to superimpose on a drawing. And what we got out of it is as close as this. We can literally build a graphic novel. And I think there are stories of 5 rajas that were there. And then just to give another example of how are we using photogrammetry applications is we are able to get the profile. This is a dargah in Gulbarga, where this profiling is helping us in building the staircase that can go on top of the dome. And then to be able, because as you can see, it's not a clear semicircle, and photogrammetry also gives us a volume, which also does a lot of help in project management like this. Like this was achieved after the photogrammetric output. We were able to get the complete dome surface. Now there's another one, Vanaparthi in Hyderabad. The elevation, the one on top is photogrammetry, the one on below is illustration converted. And then we also have some examples to show with excavation pits. This is Adichanallur, done for ASI. Then there are multiple other ways where we are talking about internal sections. We are talking about plans. We are talking about elevations of the building. And to kind of finally summarize the same old, the first thing that we are talking about is resource, tool, data, information, process, adopting the purpose, understanding the context, building your own digital repositories as individual groups or firms or practices, and able to keep those data retrievable at any point of time, overall creating values and asserts. I'll end the presentation with the one of the monasteries that we documented last August as part of a care school, summer school in Nubra Valley. So this was around like 2,000, 2,500 images, where we have given the 3D model printer to the monastery, as well as all these orthomosaic information of plants, elevations, and the kind of sectional profiles that we get. And that we have given it as a part of an archive, digital archive with the monastery administration. I'm hoping that they will be using that forever now. And that's where I would end with some acknowledgements and one of a very old photograph from Mahabalipuram, a simple photograph with a human scale and kind of like driving through. Yes, I'm done, Abhirami. I think I'm on time.
Yeah, sure. So thank you. Sir. So anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Maniyarasan.
Money is
Yeah,
fine.
I can call you as Mani.
Money
Yeah.
is fine. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was very interesting because we have heard about photogrammetry, but I mean you covered all the aspects, like we were just seeing the drawings in the form of photographs there. I mean that is the actual thing. So Now, what do you see the future directions in the field of photogrammetry in India? I mean, in the coming years, what is the future?
No, the future in India has to catch up. That's the only thing. Because
Mm,
what we see when I go to the conferences across, we see that the Western countries, the conservators are using it as an inherent process. Like
correct.
I even met one of my senior who's working in Sydney. He's an interior designer, and they also work on adaptive reuse projects. So how do they get drawings, or what is the process? I was just generally talking, and then he say they would they have their hireable laser scanning teams or
Okay.
photogrammetry teams, and then they will be given the job. They will give them a point cloud data. The
Okay.
architecture team will not get a set of drawings of section elevation or anything. They will get a 3D point cloud data. They will cut wherever they want. They
Oh,
will get whatever, they will have the texture whichever side, whichever they want, and then they straight away, most of them use straight away in the BIM softwares.
okay.
So
Okay.
they are
That,
able to. The one problem with heritage is that the points, number of points are too many. So that is one reason HBIM is like taking a lot of time, and optimization is again another problem. So whenever because a lot of people started doing the digital methods, the digital documentation methods, but then the ecosystem, there is a lot of gap. Like, because
mm,
you need, earlier we can give as a PDF, everyone had a CAD or a JPJ or a MOV file, and we can open that in our phones, we can open on laptops. Now we have multiple formats, we have multiple things. Like, someone has given the data, 3D data, and gone, and the clients or the stakeholders, they don't know how to do, what to do with it. They have paid, and also that ecosystem has to start probably from academics. What
okay.
was a small niche digital heritage department in York, in Texas, in Australia, and all, has become a self-sustained, completely, fully functionable, separate departments. Now, conservation has become a poor department in front of them, because the
Correct.
digital heritage, they are also talking about the UI UX, they're talking about GIS integration, we are talking about building virtual cities, museums, and a lot of things. And the photogrammetry or the laser scanning data is the master mother data.
Okay.
So
Okay.
this is a point where I can give this to a filmmaker, I can give this to a conservator, I can give this
Okay.
to a museum person also, and they will do according to that. When in conservation, they are going to use as an authentic information to assessment and restoration, whereas a filmmaking guy is going to just play with it. Is just going to take it to a next level, like a gaming software environments and all. So
Okay.
we are ready to start to
Yeah.
say.
Okay, I know. I mean, we lag behind there,
Yeah,
But I also, like I was very uh, keen to know some of the integration of this VR and heritage, So, I mean, it actually helps in, I mean, even in the boosting the tourism as well.
yeah,
Um, so, I was also thinking about this accessibility and inclusivity. I mean, how can VR heritage experiences be more accessible and inclusive for different kind of audience, like the disabled people or
yeah.
people, I mean, tourists with different age groups,
Yeah.
So I think, like tourism can actually, they can integrate this VR and, this heritage
Yeah.
as well. So, yeah,
We-
but as you mentioned, I mean, we lag behind, now we have to
No, I
buck
think
up,
one thing is
yeah.
we need to be cautious about the digital heap that we are going to make,
Mm,
because there is a lot of different virtual methods that come in, and
mm,
most of them are unusable after a period
yeah.
of time. Either it gets outdated, or there are these VR glasses are not really comfortable. Now,
Okay,
Apple is
okay,
coming with a new glass which is going to identify our eye views and machine learn our understanding, and is going to turn around like that. And
okay.
they say, but you can't wear it more than 20 minutes, and they are still
Oh,
working on it. So there's a lot of gap in that. There's a lot
Okay.
of gap in that. And standardization is not there yet. Like if we
Hmm.
say drawings, CAD drawings, and there might be a little variations here and there. But then when we are talking about virtual environment, and after COVID, almost 9 of 10 museums across the world has turned into virtual. They use that opportunity. They continued
Correct.
virtual, and everyone has done it differently. It's
Oh,
not the
okay.
same process at all. So you need to be wary about the end product. You need to be wary about what will that happen after 20 years, 10 years. So it is not just great that, oh, we just did 3D documentation, but then it has to be readable. It should be able to be usable at every point of time. And like I said, the repository should be there, available, accessible, and resilient against all the fragility of the hard disks and all those stuff has to hold true to. So a lot
Very
of
true.
things. So we need to look
Yeah.
at as data capture, data process, and data archiving as different things. They are not all the same.
All the same.
Yeah.
Correct. Very true. Yeah.
Anyone else? No one? So just one more thing, adding
Yeah.
to whatever you have said, because you said like, you yourself told that laser and the photogrammetry has taken a little power over the actual conservation that's happening. I mean, the glamour part of it, because now when we are talking about the VR, there are certain museums where like certain areas which can't be renovated or which they couldn't due to the budgetary or anything. So we have these virtual museum system where like, that area. So kind of do you think when it goes a little beyond, shouldn't we have a balance, especially when it comes to the conservation part? Because or is it okay like to I understand like when you don't have something the VR helps us to visualize and all that, but would it become like in the from the conservation part, from the legality or the budget or from the government end, will it
So
become an easy?
it will eventually become easy, but one thing I would say from my experience is that the gap, or rather that the celebratory mode and then superficial data that is coming out from the technologists when it is given to conservators. Now, there is a huge gap from many projects that I've seen between what these guys who are working with technology, who talk about the point cloud data and all kind of these fancy jargons, and conservators don't have an idea about what they are talking about. And they are talking about condition assessment. They are talking about color change. They are talking about humidity. And these guys don't understand that. So the whole solution is there where the masters needs to have a few modules on these digital heritage integration to become a common thing. Like it should not be something like, oh, that is something someone else has to do and we are not supposed to do it as conservators. Like having a camera or having a 360 camera should be every conservator's equipment toolkit, or at least the group. And when you kind of hire someone when you probably dealing with a larger site, when you're dealing with something that requires that additional expertise. But but conservators should be able to read through what is being given, what is a point cloud, how can I use it. I think complete understanding has to happen, because a lot of projects I have seen where they've got the laser scanner, they've documented, they've given in a hard disk, a 2 TB hard disk with all data, and we don't even know what extensions are they, and we don't even know what softwares they will open. Now that is where the problem is. So even the early tenders that used to come out, they will just say, oh, give us 3D data, and no one has a clue about what it is. So now I have seen, like later, like 2 3 months before, I saw one of the tender from ASI. It's completely detailed. I was so happy to see that thing where they've specified everything. You need to have this, and all. Because 2 3 years before, when a few institutions asked about like some 3D documentation, they were very random in their question. So I literally had to educate them. You know what? You're gonna get this. So many things. What do you want? What are you going to use it for? Then it will be easier for me to just use that. The simplest thing is 360 cameras. 360 cameras is the one thing that all the museums are using. You just need to probably take 25 images and then you need to link it like a Google Street View. Google Street View is a 360 camera. You just keep jump. It gives you a perception of 3D, but it is not 3D. So that is how the integration in academia is where the gap is, according to me. There is one module I saw in Anna University. There is one Chennai college which has conservation. They have a digital documentation module. But when I ask, they say they have done it, they do it theoretically. And I also have seen the remote sensing and photogrammetry from geoinformatics sessions. It's so theoretical. I don't understand head or tail of it because they're talking about mathematical integration of the photo from here to there. How do you process that? And it's all theoretical. So that they do it in a different method, the remote sensing people. But for conservators, we are talking about information that can be assessed and analyzed. Digital heritage is the thing either SPA or SEPT or some college should come and start. I think it's high time. There is a separate department on that because there is a lot of money on that.
One more thing, like I was just, since this was just a very superficial knowledge I had about this photogrammetry, So, but I think your session gave me a lot of insights on that. So, when we look at the Indian system, do they really have that much of knowledge on the digital heritage? So, I mean, about the photogrammetry, are there any specialized people in the government organizations?
So there are, say, SEPT does the CPP program every, like last year there were 2 sessions. This year they are not at slaughter. So which has GIS for a day, photography for a day, photogrammetry for 2 days, and LiDAR scanning for 2 days. So it's integration of all of it. So there are some IITs which has LiDAR scanner. IIT Hyderabad has, IIT Bombay, IIT Delhi has. So they have it for their own projects and works. So I think we do have enough expertise now to get started with. I think we started AI degrees without anyone knowing AI in India. I think digital heritage, we are far ahead in that because almost all colleges has AI, and when they start, no one has a degree in AI. They started it. So I think that will be sorted out. But then, yeah, the laser scanning is quite costly. It's around like 50-60 lakhs for that equipment that to come in. So I think we can still count the number of institutions that have laser scanner in India. So that there is still a lag, but then that is a way that we are going to go.
Okay. Yeah.
There's some comment.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat box. What beginner level approach can be taken to introduce UG students to photogrammetry or digital heritage, as documentation in itself is an elective subject in the curricula?
So in UG, there are 2 options I see. One is in the Anna University, there is a rural studio component, which is otherwise the architectural documentation. So in SPA, we had the opportunity to document Humayun's tomb. So we have this measure drawing module. So something similarly in South, we have on rural studios where the second year students are documenting. So we tried to push a bit of it. Out of 40 people, 50 people, there are these 4 or 5 guys who are interested in photography, are interested in photogrammetry. And the other people, they are not able to pick it up because the photography is a problem. So I think the best point to start is imaging itself. To be able to use imaging that is reliable, that it's high time we move away from the typical beautiful imagery, typical compositions, and talk about documentation, photographic documentation in the second year. And then also conservation elective is there in 4th year and 5th year in many of the colleges across India. That is another point where I introduce them to photogrammetry. And then we have these summer school workshops. And like last 2-3 years, in 2018, when we announced a photogrammetry for summer school SEP, there was no one to take because no one had a clue about it. But in last 3 years, I have at least done 40 workshops across India. And then SEPT has done 3. And along with that, there is Leon Levy Foundation and Mehrangarh Museum Trust, they have this annual program, a 1 month program on imaging, documentation, imaging, and examination of art objects. So there are 4 modules, out of which photogrammetry is there. Then there is something called multispectral imaging. Then there is museum imaging, and then there is how to handle the objects. So they select 8 people every year, uh, art conservators, architectural conservators, and or different kinds of people. It doesn't, the age is not a factor. So that kind of is been working out pretty well. So from a 3 day photogrammetry, last year it became 8 day photogrammetry in that 4 week module. And then we had an art conservator from US coming in and co-tutoring it, because art conservators look at it from a minor, much more smaller level. Like they do macro photogrammetry with microscopes. So they are talking about paintings and layers and all. So there are, I think, SEPT and Mehrangarh are 2 institutions that I can say that has continuously worked on. And then there are other, like in Christ, I did a couple of elective workshop in the previous 2-3 years. So individual institutions are happening based on the tutors, the people, the administration, and basically the timeline also, how it works and all. There's one more.
I think a couple questions from Sangeeta. Does photogrammetry help in underwater conservation efforts like in Dwarka? And the second one is whether it helps in documenting works like paintings in caves, Ajanta, Ellora.
The Ajanta Ellora is absolutely on dot. It's there. There is no question on that. There need not be any doubt on that. The first one is also there. There are multiple sessions that are happening in Europe. There is one that has been announced recently by ICC ROM. There is one on normal photogrammetry, laser scanning, and manual drawing. It's been announced like 2 days before. And there is one more, again, I'm not sure, I forgot the organization. They're doing it on underground, underwater photography. So underground is done by the GPR, the ground penetrating radars. Underwater photography is done. So there is one interesting series in Netflix. It's called After Apocalypse or Some Apocalypse, where it's a series of 6 episodes where this wannabe archaeologist tries to uncover details and then kind of busts the myths of typical historians and archaeologists. He every episode he takes one site, and the interesting part for me was every site he uses a different technology to uncover it. So in one site there is a laser scanner, in other site there is a GPR, that's a ground penetrating radar. In another site there is an underwater documentation that's happening. So that's a very interesting thing to actually have a little better idea about it. There are multiple courses that's running across. SciArc is another organization. They are the MNC of digital documentation. They have the 3D data of Notre Dame before fire. So you understand the monetary value of that. So they do a lot of academic outreach projects nowadays, online, mostly online though. See that ICROM, and then there is a conference that is happening in Seoul, Korea in August, and it is done by SIPA, that is a Photogrammetry Association. That is there. So they kind of like throw a lot of workshops. So there's a conference, there is even a call for paper. You can check SIPA, soul.org. I think that's the website name. So it is open now. It is open now. The call for papers are open now. So these kind of opportunities are happening across, and almost all the conservation oriented conferences have a component of digital heritage or photogrammetry or laser scanning as a part of one of the key tracks now. In the last 2-3 years, that has happened across. Documentation has become so one thing is documentation is not conservation. Documentation is not conservation. Documentation is a first step towards conservation. It is a problem when we celebrate too much also. Oh, I made a 3D, but if the conservator is not using it, then what is the point of making the 3D out? So all those aspects have to be taken into account. Once the conservators are inside, then the real action happens in the practice.
Is there any more questions?
Some comments, that's all. Yeah.
That's it. Shall we wrap it up? Okay. As we wrap up this enriching session of the Heritage Insights series, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all the participants for joining us today. We hope you leave with fresh perspectives and renewed enthusiasm for preserving and celebrating our heritage. I would also like to extend a heartfelt appreciation to Dr. Shaila Bantanu, Director of BMS School of Architecture, and architect Shobha Narendra Kumar, Director of CRDS, for their visionary leadership in conceptualizing and organizing the Heritage Insight series. Your dedication has not only enriched our discussions but also fostered meaningful interdisciplinary collaboration between architecture, history, and the arts. A special note of gratitude to architect Maniyarasan for his insightful and inspiring session. Your lecture on photogrammetry, the transformative role of imaging in cultural heritage, has not only deepened our understanding of this powerful tool but also highlighted its immense potential in preserving and documenting our cultural heritage. The way you seamlessly integrated technical knowledge with practical applications demonstrated the transformative impact of imaging technologies in the conservation and study of architectural and cultural sites. Before we conclude, I'm excited to announce our next session on April 12th, where we'll explore the topic Vedas to Mahakum, the eternal saga of Naga Sadhus, with historian Rekha Rao. Thank you once again to every participant. Let us continue to honor and preserve the legacy of our history as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, ma'am.